Alicia's POV. I was woken up by the sound of loud clacking on the stone floor, with my heart thumping in my ears and eyes stinging. I slowly sat up. It was cold and damp, when the smell of death and mold assaulted my nose. I finally saw my captor. He leaned down against the silver bars of my cell, inspecting my appearance, no doubt. He smelled like cigarette and blood. I desperately wanted to shield my face from his, as it felt like he was undressing me with his eyes. "They did get a pretty one. What's your name, sweetie?" His voice was hoarse and cracking, and he had yellow teeth that made me want to vomit. "Fuck off," I croaked out. That seemed to anger him as he stood and opened the cell. He effortlessly picked me up and slung me over his shoulder. I had no strength to fight back, so I only managed a nasty glare that he couldn't even see. As we walked through the corridor, I realized there wasn't anyone else here, other than a closed silver door beside my cell. I couldn't see any potential ways out. I heard a lock click as he opened a door, and light flooded my eyes. He kept walking. Once I was able to see, I noticed we appeared to be in a very old building. The walls were peeling and moldy. The floors were scratched and stained in many places with water damage around every corner. Finally, we made it to an open area. I could hear many heartbeats around. He dropped me and I fell into a heap on the cold floor. My ribs ached and skin itched from the dirty environment. "Look what we have here." I glanced up and saw a man seated in an old stone chair. He looked old, around 50, and he wore rag-like clothes. "My men found this one near the old tree."
"My men found this one near Old Tree. She's young and would no doubt make a good maid, maybe even a good wife if you train her up."
I gagged at that, ignoring the angry glare from a scrappy woman behind the old man. "Put her in cell house 9. Make sure the doll is still there." I wanted to slap the pleased look right off his face, but settled for a cold glare when my arms protested any movement.
"Yes, master."
With that, I was hoisted up and back over the dirty man's shoulder. What felt like an eternity passed before I was finally given a glass of water. My throat burned with every breath, and I decided to take my chances with the dirty glass to get a bit of relief. The new cell actually had a window, but other than that, it was the same as the first one. I thought for a brief second, before thunder invaded my thoughts. Throughout the storm, I imagined being in my cousin's room, sat in front of his fireplace playing cards and laughing away my fear of thunder as rain poured from the skies. His pine and floral scent always made me feel safe. When I was 9, sometimes I'd sneak into his room during storms and snuggle him. Mom was never happy and said I needed to grow up and get over my fears. That's why I'll always be grateful to my cousin. He was there for me when my parents weren't. Sometimes I'd like to think of him as my dad. His deep voice read me to sleep many nights, and his stories fueled my imagination. That's why when Mom and Dad died, it didn't hit me as hard as it probably should have. When I think of home, I see his face and strong arms to hold me. I hear his voice and cheerful laugh to comfort me. I smell his scent, and everything's suddenly okay. That's why I'm not freaking out right now. I'm confident he'll find me. When I finally get to see those dirty bastards begging for his mercy down on their knees, I can laugh in their faces and watch all hope leave their eyes as they realize they kidnapped the wrong girl. Messing with an alpha's cousin is never a good idea, especially when he basically raised her himself. And with that, I say, good luck, bastards. You'll need it. I woke up to a loud door opening. Muffled voices fled through the room until it was shut again, and the clacking of steel-toed boots echoed in the hall. I saw a woman pass by my cell with a small glass of water in her hand. She stopped outside the silver door and banged loudly. "Here's your water, rat!" She spat angrily, sitting it down and pushing it through a small hatch at the bottom. I'm sure half spilled onto the stone floor. As the glass slid through the narrow opening, she started banging again. "Hey, you better not be dead yet. Master'll be here in an hour. Get ready!" With that, she stormed back out of the room. Once she was gone, I listened closely for a heartbeat to my left. It was only when I pressed my ear against the side of the cell that I finally heard the faint thumping of something alive through the wall. Judging from the inconsistent rhythm and unhealthy time in between each beat, I could only guess what kind of horrible condition that being was in. Around 5 minutes passed before I heard the scraping of chains slowly move towards the door. Something hard clanked against the glass as it was lifted from the ground. What unnerved me the most was the distinct lack of breathing. My eyes traced the wall in front of me until I found a hole. I heard water splatter against the stone floor and the clink of a cup being sat down. "Hello?" I was met with a cold silence. The still and musky air made it hard to breathe as what seemed like forever passed. I thought nothing would come of my raspy question until I heard the chains moving again. They seemed to stop right in front of me on the opposite side of the wall. My heart raced as I waited for a response. When none was given, I plucked up the courage to try again. Hello? My throat hurt, and I was assaulted with a coughing fit after inhaling dust. I dry heaved when the strongest smell of blood and injury invaded my nose. After finally composing myself, the silence began. By now, I was more than a little tired with the lack of response, but reasoning that maybe this being was afraid, I elected to try again. Are you okay? Is it a little chilly for you too? Again, silence. I almost peed myself when a pale, bony hand snaked into my cell from the little hole in the wall. It looked to be the hand of a young teen, or even a child considering the size. It was trembling and looked a little blue and purple at the fingertips. What made my heart hurt was how bruised it was. Forgetting my fear, I gently wrapped one of my hands around it. A shiver went through my body at how frigid it was. If I didn't see it moving, you could easily convince me that it wasn't a live hand I was holding. "Hi. I know this isn't the best first impression, but I'm glad I know you're there." The pale thumb shakily rubbed over the top of my hand. I felt like that was their way of saying, "I'm glad you're there too." My heartbeat sped up considerably when a sharp, stinging pain burned into my pointed finger. After quickly retracting my hand, I inspected the injury. The metallic sheen to the burn made me realize that I must have touched silver. I turned my attention back to the hole that was now handless. "Can you give me your hand again?" I coughed, before settling my burning lungs. After a few seconds, the shaky hand appeared from the small hole. I grabbed it and gently inspected it before I found what looked like a silver earring hoop that pierced right through the underside of their bony wrist. I took notice of a wire that wrapped around the hoop and went back up the arm. After taking a deep breath, I decided to just hold their hand, maternal instincts and my wolf telling me I need to warm it up. They didn't resist my warmth, so I stayed pressed up against the wall, trying my best to mind-link my cousin. Before I knew it, though, the loud door opened again, and a stench that made my eyes water flooded the room. The hand pulled away from me as the door beside my cell was opened. The following minutes felt like a year as I listened to what is easily the most infuriating, terrifying, and disgusting things being done to that person. I felt like a horrible person thinking this. But if I could hear the voice that belonged to the small hand as they were tortured and assaulted, I think I would have just about died. I had been sick multiple times. By the time the old man left, I tried talking to the person in the other cell, but there was no response. I tried sticking my hand through the hole, but it wouldn't fit. I even got down on my stomach in an attempt to look into the other cell, but it was so dark. The only thing I could make out was the puddle of blood seeping through the hole and slowly into my cell. Alicia's POV. The moment I couldn't hear a faint heartbeat anymore, I started sobbing. My head hurt, my eyes were stinging, and every breath I took felt like swallowing sandpaper. My wolf was whimpering and pacing. I couldn't help but think about the fact that there was a dead child in the cell beside me. If not a child, then at least a very young person. My insides twisted as I coughed and choked on the air, trying to catch my breath. I've been kidnapped before. A few times, actually, but nothing like this happened. At most, it took a few hours to be found and rescued. Twice I actually made it out myself and found my cousin on his way to me. But not this time. This time I was truly stuck, trapped in a cell with silver bars and my feet chained together. I didn't know who held the key to my shackles either. After a few minutes of wailing, I noticed my wolf had stopped pacing. She was listening intently to something. I slowed my sobs and tried to calm down enough to hear, and what I heard made me want to cry for a different reason. I almost didn't believe my own ears as a familiar heartbeat echoed into my head. Are you okay? Can you hear me? Silence. Please, please, just give me a sign that you're alive over there. Silence. At this point, I really started to think my mind was playing tricks on me. I've gone crazy, haven't I? It's barely been 2 days and I'm losing it. I was contemplating screaming as hard as I could and just hoping someone would hear and go check if the person was dead. But then I heard it. The chains started moving along the floor. Very slowly, they were dragged closer and closer until they finally stopped across from me on the other side of the damn wall. My heart was beating in my ears, and I held my breath, waiting, hoping to see that little hand reach out for me. And finally, it did. Third party, POV. Alpha Felix.
What? I said not to disturb me unless you found her.
His voice was low, and the words were a growl. Every warrior in the room shrank away from the fuming man. As Beta, Colton stayed calm under his fiery gaze and golden eyes. Alpha, we found her location. The anger turned into a cold glare at his Beta's words, his golden eyes returning to a somber gray, like storm clouds waiting to release a tsunami.
Where is she? Who has taken her? I'm going to kill them.
The question-turned-angry statement was loud in an otherwise silent room. She was taken at Old Tree. We tracked her sent to the abandoned prison in Pinefield. I believe a group of rogues have taken up residence there. A low growl rumbled through the room like thunder.
Not for very long.
Plans were set in motion instantly, and a certain group of rogues were about to be wiped from the face of the earth at the strong-clawed hands of a very angry alpha and equally worried cousin and pack. Alicia's POV. The small bloody hand was so cold, it trembled in my grip and my heart broke with every little shake and drop of blood that splattered to the floor. Now was the point in the love story where a prince would arrive to save the maiden in distress. I'm not the only one to believe that those kinds of stories are real. But dear goddess Celine, if there's a time to prove me wrong, let it be now. The minutes passed like hours, and hours passed like years. I screamed and yelled and sobbed when that stupid fucking sick demon of a man came back. He ignored me like I didn't even exist, and everything repeated itself. The cries of agony when I no longer heard that small heartbeat. The coughing and choking followed. And thank the goddess that small heartbeat fluttered back to life again. This happened 3 more times. 3! It was a beautiful fucking miracle that the tortured soul beside me was still alive. I like to believe I'm a strong person. I like to think that whatever mud life throws at me, I'll trudge through it and come out the other side. But compared to what this little being has been through, I now know that isn't true. If I had to live that existence for even 1 hour, I'd break in half like a toothpick. Hey, I know I'd never be able to understand what pain you're going through right now, but I want you to know I'm going to be right here, okay? I'll stay right here. For the first time since I got here, I heard a noise outside the barred window in my cell. Any ounce of bravery or courage I had upon waking this morning was gone. I ignored the noise and focused all my attention on the only way I can comfort my little friend, gently rubbing over the top of their hand. I told myself when I was little that I would become the bravest, strongest, fastest, and best female alpha. Yet here I am, 21, stuck in a cell and not able to stop someone from being tortured to death, right beside me. When the little hand in my grip went limp, I started silently crying. Not cold, but shaking. Not hurt, but breaking. Not helpful, but still doing my damn best to try. A little part of me wondered how long this person has been living in that cell, how long they've been getting tortured, and the rest of me was terrified to actually know the answer. Because of how they reacted, like it was routine, I felt as though it would be better for me to not know. The air got colder, and soon it became so cold the blood on the floor was frozen solid. My chest ached, and I was slightly shivering now and then, though I had no reason to complain. The little hand I held was shaking pretty violently, non-stop, At first, I thought they were having a seizure, but after confirmation that they weren't, the situation became even more clear to me. They were no doubt covered in frozen blood, already just being as thin as I thought, from the size of their hand, was an issue. I know the less body fat you have, the colder you'll get. I desperately wanted to break the wall in between us and wrap them in my arms, just hold them and warm them up, but I couldn't. The only thing I could do is hold their hand and pray to Moon Goddess that we're saved soon. Just as I was about to drift asleep, I heard the loud door opening and closing, followed by the footfalls of a heavy-set person. Glancing up through the bars of my cell, I was met with an unfamiliar face. The man unlocked my cell and pulled me away from the wall, forcing me to let go of their little cold hand. I then proceeded to kick and scream and bite at everything I could as he carried me down the hall. I took one last glance at the cell, memorizing the cold silver door and small hatch cut into the bottom. My blood ran cold as I questioned if I'd ever see that door again.